a political settlement, a permanent political settlement was not yet established. And so France and Britain brought together the Serbs and the Kosovo Liberation Army to a castle outside of Paris called Rambouillet. And what they did is they brokered an agreement that involved internal self-rule for the for Kosovo, a return to basically what they had before 1989, a withdrawal of Serb security forces that would remain in place, and a peacekeeping force would supervise. And the Serbs agreed basically to everything, and they were on the verge of concluding a deal. There was some difference of opinion as to who should do the peacekeeping, whereas France and Britain wanted NATO to do it, but the Serbs wanted the United Nations to have a UN peacekeeping force, and that was still a difference. But it was generally agreed by everybody, including Madeleine Albright, the U.S. Secretary of State, that the Serbs were completely ready and virtually agreed to almost all the political terms.
And that was in what year? That was when?
It was early 1999.
Okay, so in the spring of 99.
That's right. And then basically at the last moment, a new condition was inserted. A military annex to the agreement was inserted. It had not been there before. Very likely this was written by General Wesley Clark, who was a top NATO general. All right. And it basically said, just in sort of parenthetically, that NATO forces would have the right to basically operate and essentially occupy not only all of Kosovo, but all of Serbia. Meaning Serbia would be almost like a defeated and occupied country. And this is a completely new condition. And that led to the complete breakdown of negotiations. The way it was presented was that after the Serbs read the military annex, they were, of course, appalled. And the European delegation met them for another routine meeting. And the Serbs said, I'll just quote it directly. They said, have you come to fuck us again? All right. Have you come to fuck us again? Well, that was the end of the negotiations. Clearly, they broke down after that. The Serb delegation left, and everybody began preparing for war. The question is, why was this inserted? How was this done? Well, we had new information on that because John Gilbert, who was the #2 figure in the British Ministry of Defense, later testified before Parliament that it was done deliberately by the Americans to provoke basically a war, because the Americans wanted to settle this through war. All right. They did not want to settle it peacefully. I should add that the British and French were not enthusiastic about this. Even the British were not enthusiastic. Normally one thinks of the British as America's puppy dog, but in this case, the British basically resented the idea that the United States was trying to undermine the agreement. And when the United States proposed a bombing campaign, the British Foreign Minister Cook told Madeleine Albright, the Secretary of State, that our lawyers think you can't do this without a UN Security Council resolution authorizing it, which is true, of course. And that wouldn't happen because it would be vetoed by both Russia and China, who are on the Security Council. And Madeleine Albright simply responded, why don't you get new lawyers?